In the summer of 1883, along a faint wagon trace cutting north across the Nebraska prairie, the wind carried dust in long, slow spirals that never quite settled. The grass stood tall in dry, bleached gold, under a sky so wide it pressed the earth flat. No trees broke the line of the horizon except the thin, dark smudge of cottonwoods far off along some unseen creek. The sun stood high and merciless, drawing sweat from every living thing that moved. Ellen Harper sat on the tailgate of the last wagon in the train, her skirts bunched around her knees, three small children pressed against her like frightened birds. The oldest, a girl of 7 named Clara, held the hand of her 5-year-old brother Samuel, while the youngest little Rose, only 3, slept fitfully in Ellen's lap, her small face streaked with dirt and tears long dried. The wagon ahead had pulled away an hour before the driver, not even glancing back when Ellen called out that the axle had cracked again. The iron band split clean through from the last river crossing. She had stood there, waving voice raw until the dust swallowed them. Then silence, except for the wind and the children's soft breathing. Her husband Jacob had died 2 weeks earlier of the fever that swept the train like a scythe. He had lain in the wagon bed for days, shivering, whispering apologies for bringing them out here, promising Oregon would be different. When he stopped breathing, the others helped her bury him under a cairn of prairie stones, quick and quiet, no words spoken over the grave because no one had the strength left for ceremony. After that, the train moved on. Ellen had driven the mules herself, hands blistered, eyes burning from dust and grief. But the wagon could not keep pace. The axle gave way for good this morning, and the others decided they could not wait. They said it plainly the children would slow them all, and winter was coming early this year. Better one family lost than the whole train. She watched the last wagon disappear into the heat shimmer, then turned back to the broken wheel. The iron rim lay in pieces in the grass. She had no tools, no spare parts, only a knife, a half sack of cornmeal, and a canteen that rang hollow when she shook it. The children stared at her with wide eyes, waiting for her to fix what could not be fixed. Clara tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, are they coming back?" Ellen swallowed the knot in her throat. "No, sweetheart. Not today." The words hung between them, heavy as lead. She lifted Rose higher against her chest, feeling the child's small heartbeat fast and steady against her own. Samuel began to cry then, a low, hopeless sound, and Clara tried to hush him, stroking his hair the way Ellen had taught her. The prairie stretched away in every direction, empty and indifferent, the same in all ways. No road now, only ruts fading into grass. No sound but the wind moving through the stems like breath over dry paper. Ellen stood, legs trembling from exhaustion, and walked a slow circle around the wagon. She looked for anything that might serve: a straight sapling for a splint, a flat stone to hammer with, but found only more grass and more sky. She came back and knelt beside the children. "We'll rest here a while," she said. "Then we'll walk." Where? Clara asked. "Toward water. There has to be water somewhere." She did not say the rest, that walking might kill them all before nightfall, that the canteen would not last the day, that she had no clear notion which way the next stage station lay. She only gathered them close, wrapped her shawl around the 3 small bodies, and waited for the heat to ease. The sun slid lower, turning the grass to fire, then to blood, then to shadow. Night came sudden and cold. The children slept fitfully against her, and Ellen sat awake, staring into the dark, listening for sounds that never came. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time lost shape out here. Then, faint at first, a rhythm reached her ears, the slow, measured thud of hooves on packed earth. A single horse coming from the south. She stiffened, hand reaching for the knife at her belt. The children stirred but did not wake. A shape appeared against the stars, a man on horseback, tall and the saddle hat low. He reined up 20 paces away, horse blowing softly. He did not speak at once. He sat, studying the wagon, the broken wheel, the woman with children huddled at her feet. Finally, he swung down boots, hitting ground with a soft thud. He was lean, weathered, perhaps 35, face shadowed under the brim. A faint scar ran along his jaw. He carried no rifle that she could see, only a coiled rope at his hip and a canteen that sloshed when he moved. "You folks in trouble?" His voice was low, unhurried, carrying the drawl of Texas or somewhere close. Ellen stood slowly, keeping the knife hidden in the folds of her skirt. Axel gave out. "The train went on without us." He nodded once as if he had heard such stories before. His eyes moved over the children, then back to her. "How long since midday?" He looked at the sky, then at the horizon. "No water close. Nearest creek's 5 miles, maybe 6. You won't make it walking tonight." She said nothing. What was there to say? He stepped closer, careful hands open. "Name's Caleb Reed. I ride scout for the Army out of Fort Kearney sometimes. Mostly, I just ride." He paused. "I can take a look at that wheel if you'll let me." Ellen studied him. Something in his quiet way eased the knot in her chest, though she did not trust it yet. She stepped aside. He crouched by the wagon, ran his hands over the split iron, tested the wood. After a minute, he stood. "Can't fix it here, but I got tools back at my camp 2 hours east. I can haul you there come morning. Rig a travois if need be, and the children they ride with you. Horse can carry us all short ways." She looked at Clara, at Samuel, at Rose, still asleep in the shawl. The night wind cut through her thin dress. She had no choice, and she knew it. "All right," she said. He built a small fire with buffalo chips he carried in a sack, boiled water from his canteen, made weak coffee. He gave the children each a strip of jerky, chewing slowly themselves. They ate in silence, the fire snapping between them. When the children slept again, Caleb sat across from her, elbows on knees. "You got kin ahead?" he asked. "None living." He nodded. "Husband, fever. 2 weeks back." "I'm sorry." The words were plain, but they carried weight. Ellen felt tears rise sharp and sudden, but she blinked them down. She would not cry in front of this stranger. He poked the fire with a stick. "I lost folks, too. Wife and boy. Diphtheria. 4 years ago. Left me riding alone after that." She looked at him, then really looked. The scar on his jaw seemed deeper in the firelight. His eyes were dark, steady, holding something broken but not gone. They sat quiet after that, only the wind and the small sounds of sleeping children. When the fire died to coals, he spread his blanket for her, and the little ones took his own place a few paces off, back against the wagon wheel. Ellen lay down, Rose curled into her side, Clara and Samuel close. She listened to Caleb's breathing, slow and even. For the first time in weeks, the prairie did not feel quite so vast, so empty. Click subscribe and explore the Wild West with the Wild West spirit. Dawn came thin and gray, the kind of light that showed every crack in the earth and every line on a face. Ellen woke stiff, her back against the wagon's side, Rose's small hand still curled in the front of her dress. Clara and Samuel lay tangled together under the blanket Caleb had spread. The fire was cold ash now, and the prairie smelled of dry grass and distant rain that never arrived. Caleb was already up. He had watered his horse from a leather bucket he carried, checked the cinch, and was rolling his blanket when Ellen stirred. He glanced over, nodded once. "Morning," he said. "We'll move soon as the children eat." He had cornbread wrapped in oilcloth, hard but not moldy, and a strip of dried apple for each child. Ellen portioned it, carefully saving half for later. Rose chewed slowly, eyes still heavy with sleep, while Samuel watched Caleb with open curiosity. "You got a gun?" the boy asked. Caleb touched the revolver at his hip. "I do, but I don't draw it unless I have to." Samuel nodded solemnly, as though filing the information away. They broke camp in silence. Caleb rigged a rough travois from 2 long poles he cut with his knife and the rope from his saddle. He lashed the broken axle and wheel to it, then tied the contraption to his horse's saddle horn. Ellen helped the children climb onto the wagon bed. She would walk beside it. Caleb mounted, leading the horse at a slow walk, so the travois would not jolt too hard. The morning stretched long. The sun rose higher, burning off the mist, turning the grass to pale fire again. Ellen kept one hand on the wagon side, the other holding Rose when the child wanted down. Her blisters had opened during the night. Each step sent fresh pain up her legs. She did not complain. Complaining changed nothing. Caleb rode ahead a little, then dropped back, keeping them in sight. Once he pointed to a distant line of green. "That's the creek I told you about. We'll noon there." When they reached it, the water ran shallow over smooth stones, clear enough to see minnows darting. Caleb unsaddled the horse and let it drink. Ellen knelt and washed the children's faces, then her own. The cold shocked her skin awake. She filled the canteen, then let the children splash their feet while she sat on a flat rock and closed her eyes for a moment. The sound of water moving over stone was the first gentle thing she had heard in weeks. Caleb crouched nearby, filling his own canteen. "You're tough," he said quietly. "Most would have quit back there." "I didn't have the luxury," she answered. He looked at her, then really looked. "Where you headed before the wheel gave Oregon?" Jacob said the Willamette had good soil. "Said we could start over." Caleb nodded. "Good land if you can reach it." "And you?" she asked. "You said you ride Scout sometimes." "Used to. Army pays steady, but the orders got smaller each year. Now, I mostly hunt buffalo when the herds come through sell hides to the traders at Kearney. Keeps me moving." He paused. "Keeps me from thinking too much." She understood that kind of moving. She'd been doing it since the day they left Missouri. They ate the last of the cornbread, drank creek water, rested the horse. The children played at the edge of the stream, building pebble towers that kept falling. Clara showed Rose how to skip stones. Samuel tried and failed, laughing when the rock sank straight down. Ellen watched them, a small ache blooming in her chest. They were still children. They could still laugh. Caleb watched too. After a while, he spoke, voice low, so the children would not hear. "My boy was about Samuel's age. Liked to build things. Little bridges out of sticks. Always falling apart, always starting again." Ellen turned to him. "What was his name?" "Thomas." He said it plain, without flourish. "My wife was Mary. They got sick fast. I buried them under an oak back in East Texas. Couldn't stay after that." She reached out, almost touched his arm, then drew back. "I'm sorry." He gave a small nod. "We carry what we carry." They moved on after the horse had grazed. The afternoon grew hot again, but a thin line of clouds appeared in the west, promising nothing yet holding off the worst of the sun. Caleb told stories to the children as they walked, short ones about coyotes outsmarting wolves, about rivers that changed course overnight. Samuel listened hard. Clara asked questions. Rose fell asleep against Ellen's shoulder. By late afternoon, the land began to dip. Caleb pointed to a low rise. "My camp's just over that. Got a dugout, a corral, some supplies. Nothing fancy." When they crested the rise, Ellen saw it, a low earthen shelter dug into the side of a shallow draw sod roof, sprouting grass, a small pole corral with 2 more horses, a stack of firewood, and a tin bucket hanging from a post. Smoke rose thin from a chimney pipe. It looked like nothing and everything. Caleb helped the children down. Ellen stood a moment, taking it in. The place was spare, but it was shelter. It was water nearby. She could hear it now, a small spring trickling into a pool. It was not abandonment. He turned to her. "You're welcome to stay till we get that wheel fixed. Longer if you want." She looked at the children running toward the corral, already pointing at the horses. She looked at the sky, wide and quiet. She looked at Caleb standing there with dust on his hat brim and something unguarded in his eyes. "Thank you," she said. He gave a half smile, the first she had seen. "Come inside. I'll boil water." We'll see about supper. They stepped down into the cool dark of the dugout. The air smelled of earth and wood smoke and coffee left too long on the fire. For the first time in a long while, Ellen felt the smallest loosening in her chest, as though a hand had opened just enough to let her breathe. Days passed in the small dugout like pages turning slowly in a worn book. The rhythm was simple and steady dawn chores, midday heat, evening firelight. Caleb worked the broken axle first thing each morning. He had a small forge outside Cole's banked under an iron hood he'd salvaged from an abandoned claim. He heated the split rim, hammered it back into shape, over days sweating through his shirt, while Ellen kept the children away from the sparks. She learned the place quickly. The spring fed a narrow pool behind the dugout. She carried water in the tin bucket twice a day, taught Clara how to scrub the few tin plates without wasting soap. Samuel followed Caleb like a shadow, asking endless questions about horses, about the way a rope should coil, about why the prairie grass bent but never broke. Rose stayed close to Ellen, content to sit on a blanket, sorting pebbles by color or watching ants march in orderly lines across the dirt floor. Caleb spoke little at first, but the silence between them was not empty. It was the kind that let small things grow. When he came in at dusk, hands black with soot, he would wash at the basin she kept filled. She would hand him the towel without a word. He would nod, thanks. Once, when she burned her wrist pulling cornbread from the Dutch oven, he took her hand without asking, turned it gently blue on the blister until the sting eased. She did not pull away. Evenings after the children slept on the low pallet of blankets and buffalo robes, they sat outside on stools he had made from split cottonwood. The sky was vast stars sharp as knife points. He told her about Texas, the red dirt, the live oaks, the way the Brazos ran muddy after rain. She told him about Missouri, the green hills, the river that smelled of fish, and Cottonwood, the porch, where she used to shell peas with her mother. They spoke of the dead, without ceremony, naming them like stones set in place, Jacob Mary Thomas. One night, the wind came up hard from the north, carrying the first cold bite of autumn. Inside, the lamp flickered low. Caleb sat mending a bridle. Ellen darned a sock by the same light. Rose coughed once in her sleep, a small, dry sound. Ellen rose to check her, laid a cool cloth on the child's forehead. "She's warm," Ellen said quietly. Caleb set the bridle aside. "I've got willow bark. Make tea. It'll help." He brewed it, strong, bitter. Ellen held Rose against her chest while the girls sipped, grimacing, but swallowing. When the coughing eased, Caleb stayed close, sitting on the dirt floor beside the pallet. He hummed something low, tuneless, until Rose's breathing steadied and she slept again. Ellen looked at him across the dim room. "You're good with them." "I had practice once," he said. "Didn't think I'd get another chance." She felt the words settle between them, heavy and true. She reached out, rested her hand on his forearm for a moment. He did not move. When she drew back, he caught her fingers, lightly held them. "I don't know what this is," she said. "Neither do I," he answered. "But it's something." They sat like that until the lamp guttered out. Outside, the wind moaned around the sod roof, but inside the dugout felt smaller, warmer, as though the walls themselves had drawn closer. The next morning, he finished the wheel. He rolled it back under the wagon, tested the fit, greased the hub with bear fat he kept in a tin. Ellen watched from the doorway, arms folded, children at her skirts. "We could leave tomorrow," she said when he straightened. He wiped his hands on a rag. "You could." She looked at the horizon, then back at him. "The children like it here." "They do. And I—" She stopped, searched for the right shape of the words. "I don't want to walk away from this." He stepped closer. Dust clung to his lashes. A faint line of soot marked his cheek. "Then don't." She exhaled a sound almost like laughter, almost like relief. "It's not that simple. It never is." They stood there in the bright morning, prairie stretching wide around them, wind moving the grass in long, slow waves. Samuel ran up holding a lizard he had caught, showing it proudly. Clara followed, scolding him to put it down gently. Rose toddled after clutching Ellen's skirt. Caleb crouched to Samuel's level. "That's a fine catch. Now let him go find his supper." The boy obeyed, watching the lizard dart into the grass. Caleb stood again, looked at Ellen. "I've got no claim to this place," he said. "Just squatter's rights and a few years of sweat. But it's steady. Spring's good year round. Grass holds for the horses. I can file if we want paper on it." She studied his face, the scar, the quiet eyes, the lines carved by sun and loss. "And if we stay, then we stay. Together. No promises beyond what we make each day." She nodded once. Each day. That evening they ate supper outside, the children laughing over bowls of beans and cornbread. After Caleb carved a small wooden horse for Samuel, a doll for Clara, a rattle for Rose made from a dried gourd and pebbles. Ellen watched him work, knife moving, sure and slow. When the children were asleep, he took her hand and led her outside again. The moon was up silver on the grass. He stopped by the spring where water chuckled over stones. "I don't have much to give," he said. "You've given enough." He reached into his pocket, brought out a thin gold band, simple, worn smooth. "This was Mary's. I kept it because letting go felt like forgetting, but I think she'd want it used again. If you'll have it." Ellen looked at the ring, then at him. Tears came sudden and hot, but they were not only grief. She held out her hand. He slipped the band onto her finger. It fit as though made for her. She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his. "I choose this," she whispered. "I choose you." He kissed her then, slow, careful, like a man afraid the moment might break. When they drew apart, the prairie was still vast, but it no longer felt empty. They walked back to the dugout, hand in hand. Inside, the lamp burned low. The children slept soundly. Outside, the wind had quieted, leaving only the soft sound of water and the steady breathing of horses in the corral. In the morning, they would begin building a second room, perhaps a proper door, a garden plot turned against the spring. But for now, they stood together in the doorway, watching the moon cross the sky, feeling the small, fierce certainty that they were no longer alone. The weeks that followed carried the quiet weight of change. The dugout grew. Caleb and Ellen, working side by side, dug out another room using picks and shovels borrowed from a trader who passed through once a month. They hauled sod blocks, stacked them high, packed the seams with wet clay that dried hard as stone. The new space became a sleeping room for the children, with a small window cut low, so Clara could watch the sunrise without climbing onto anything. Ellen hung a curtain of old flour sacks, washed thin and soft to keep out the dust when the wind rose. Caleb taught Samuel to ride the gentlest mare, a dun with a calm eye and steady gait. The boy sat tall at first, gripping the saddle horn until his knuckles whitened, then relaxed as Caleb walked beside, one hand on the bridle, the other steadying the small back. "Breathe with her," Caleb said. "She'll carry you right if you let her." Samuel nodded, serious, already half in love with the animal. Clara preferred the ground-gathering wild plums that grew along the spring bank, staining her fingers purple, bringing handfuls to Ellen to dry for winter pies. Rose grew bolder, toddling farther each day, chasing grasshoppers that leapt ahead of her like tiny green flames. Ellen watched her with a mother's constant half-fear, half-wonder, always within reach, but letting her explore. The child learned to say Caleb clear as a bell, reaching up fat arms whenever he came near. He would lift her high, set her on his shoulders, walk the perimeter of the claim, while she patted his hat brim like a drum. One afternoon in late September, when the grass had turned the color of old honey, and the sky held the first hard blue of coming frost, a rider appeared on the southern horizon. Dust trailed him in a long plume. Ellen saw him from the doorway, felt the old tightness return to her chest. She called the children inside, stood with her back to the wall, hand resting on the knife she kept in her apron pocket. The man reined up outside the corral. He was older, face burned, dark beard streaked gray. A badge glinted on his vest, sheriff from the county seat 50 miles east. Caleb stepped out, wiping hands on his trousers, calm but watchful. Afternoon, the sheriff said. Name's Harlan Tate. Looking for a woman named Ellen Harper. Word came down the trail she was left behind last summer with 3 young ones. Caleb glanced at Ellen. She stepped forward, chin up. That's me. Tate touched his hat brim. Got a letter here from your brother-in-law, Jacob's brother.
Says he's filed claim on the Oregon land your husband intended.
Says the family wants the children raised, proper offers to send money for passage if you'll bring them west to live under his roof. Ellen felt the air leave her lungs. She had not thought of Jacob's kin in months distant formal people who had disapproved of the move from the beginning. She took the letter with steady hands, read the stiff lines concern masked, as duty obligation offered, like a bill coming due. The children belonged with family, it said. Blood family. She folded the paper, looked at Tate. And if I refuse, he shifted in the saddle. No law says you have to go. But he's got money and lawyers back east. Could make trouble. Claim abandonment negligence. Courts don't always favor a woman alone on the prairie. Caleb moved closer to her side shoulder, brushing hers. She's not alone. Tate studied them both, eyes narrowing. You, her husband not yet on paper, Caleb said, but we intend to be. The sheriff chewed the inside of his cheek, thinking, I'll tell him I delivered the message. What you do after that is your business. But he'll likely send someone else, someone with more than words. He tipped his hat again, turned his horse, rode back the way he came. Dust settled slowly. Inside, the children sensed the shift. Samuel asked why the man had come. Clara watched Ellen's face too closely. Rose simply climbed into Ellen's lap and stayed there. That night, after the lamp was blown out, Ellen lay awake beside Caleb on the narrow bed they shared now. The new room smelled of fresh earth and cut grass. Moonlight slipped through the small window. I can't lose them, she whispered. You won't. He has money, connections. I have nothing. Caleb turned toward her in the dark. You have this place. You have us. And you have time. Winter's coming. No one travels far once the snow sets in. Gives us months to figure it. She reached for his hand-laced fingers tight. What if they come in spring, then we meet them? Together, we show them a home. A family. Not a claim on paper, but real ground underfoot. Children laughing. A table, set every night. If they still want to take them after that, they'll have to drag us all to court. She felt tears slip hot down her temples into her hair. I'm scared. I know. He pulled her closer, chin resting on her head. So am I. But fear's just another wind. It passes. They lay quiet after that, listening to the children's soft breathing from the next room, the occasional stamp of a horse in the corral, the low murmur of the spring. The prairie was still vast, still indifferent in many ways, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like ground they had chosen, ground they would hold. The next morning, Ellen rose early. She baked cornbread thick with dried plums, fried eggs from the hens Caleb had traded for, set the table with every plate they owned. When the children woke, she gathered them close. We're staying, she told them. This is home now, and Caleb's staying too. We're going to make it ours. All of us. Samuel grinned wide. Claire nodded, serious and sure. Rose clapped small hands. Caleb stood in the doorway watching. When Ellen looked up, he crossed the room, took her hand, kissed the back of it where the thin gold band still gleamed. Each day, he said. Each day, she answered. Outside, frost silvered the grass. The sky stretched clear and endless. Somewhere far off, a hawk turned slow circles, hunting patient. Inside the dugout, warmth rose from the stove from small bodies from two people who had learned against every reason to stay. Winter closed in, slow but certain, like a hand curling around the prairie. Snow came first, in thin drifts that sifted through the grass, then in heavier falls that blanketed the dugout roof and muffled every sound. The wind howled some nights, rattling the tin chimney pipe, but inside the walls held firm. The stove glowed red, fed with buffalo chips, and the last of the cottonwood Caleb had split before the freeze. Ellen learned to bank the coals at night, so embers still breathed come morning. The children adapted faster than she expected. Samuel helped Caleb check the corral rails each day, brushing snow from the top poles, so the horses could reach the hay they forked down from the small loft. Claire read aloud from the one worn book. They owned a collection of frontier tales Jacob had carried, her voice steady, now less childlike. Rose learned new words every week. Snow, warm home. She said them pointing proud as though claiming each one for herself. Caleb filed the claim in January when a government surveyor passed through on his way to the fort. The man stayed one night, ate their beans and cornbread, stamped the papers with an official seal, and rode on. Caleb came back from the transaction with ink still wet on his fingers and a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. He showed Ellen the document by lamplight, Caleb Reed and Ellen Harper Reed, joint holders. She traced the names with her fingertip, felt the paper's weight like a promise made solid. They married in February, no preacher within 100 miles. Caleb spoke the words himself, standing in the doorway with snow swirling behind him. He held her hands, repeated vows he had thought out in the long, dark hours of winter nights. Ellen answered in kind voice, low but clear. The children watched from the pallet, wide-eyed. Samuel clapped when it was done. Clara smiled, small and serious. Rose tugged at Ellen's skirt until she was lifted into the circle of arms. No rings exchanged beyond the one already worn, Mary's band, now Ellen's forever. But Caleb carved two small wooden bands from cedar he had saved, smoothed them until they fit easy. They slipped them on each other's fingers, laughing softly at how the wood warmed against skin. Outside, the prairie lay white and still, but the dugout felt full of breath, of small sounds, of lives, knitting together, stitch by careful stitch. Spring arrived reluctant, the snow melting in slow patches that left the ground sodden and black. The creek swelled, running fast and cold. Caleb turned the first garden plot behind the dugout, dark earth rich with years of grass roots. Ellen planted seeds she had carried all the way from Missouri: beans, squash potatoes, a few rows of corn. Claire helped drop the seeds. Samuel carried water in buckets too big for him. Rose patted dirt over each one with serious concentration. One afternoon in April, when the grass had greened and wildflowers pushed up in yellow and purple spikes, a wagon appeared on the southern trace. Not the sheriff this time, but a man in a black suit, spectacles perched on his nose, a woman beside him in a bonnet and traveling dress. Jacob's brother Elias Harper and his wife Martha. They had come from Oregon, traveling east against the usual tide. Elias stepped down stiffly, eyes scanning the dugout, the corral, the garden plot. Martha stayed near the wagon, hands clasped tight. Ellen stood in the doorway, apron dusted with flower children clustered at her skirts. Caleb moved to her side, calm hand resting light on the small of her back. Elias cleared his throat. We received no reply to our letter. I received it, Ellen said. I chose not to answer. He looked at the children. Samuel stared back, chin up. Clara held Rose's hand. They're Harper blood. They belong with family. They are with family, Ellen answered. This is their home. Elias glanced at Caleb. And you are Caleb Reed, her husband. Martha spoke, then voice softer. We only want what's best for them. A proper school. A church. Land that's already proved up. Caleb stepped forward. This land's proved. We filed last winter. The children read, write, know their numbers. They work, they play, they're loved. Show me better than that. Elias opened his mouth. closed it. He looked at the dugout, sturdy now, whitewashed inside with lime Ellen had mixed herself. At the garden rose straight and hopeful. At the children's faces, healthy, sun-browned, unafraid. Martha touched her husband's arm. Elias. He exhaled long. We brought papers. Guardianship. But he looked again at the scene before him. I see no neglect here. There is none, Ellen said. Elias reached into his coat, brought out an envelope. This is the deed transfer, Jacob started. It's in Oregon. If you ever change your mind. He set it on the wagon step, not forcing it into her hands. Martha stepped closer, knelt to Clara's level. You look well, child. Clara nodded. We have horses. And a garden. And Caleb tells stories. Martha smiled small and sad. She stood again, looked at Ellen. If you need anything. Money. Supplies. Right. Ellen nodded once. Thank you. They climbed back into the wagon. Elias lifted the reins, hesitated. I'm sorry for your loss, he said to Ellen. And for ours. The wagon turned wheels, cutting dark tracks in the new grass. They watched until dusk swallowed it. That evening, Ellen sat on the step with Caleb children playing tag around the corral. The sky burned pink and gold. The air smelled of turned earth and sage. She leaned against him. They didn't fight. They saw what we built. She looked down at the wooden band on her finger, then at the one on his. We built more than a claim. He kissed her temple. We built a life. Night fell gentle. Inside the lamp burned steady. The children slept in their room, breathing even. Ellen and Caleb lay together listening to the spring run outside, to the soft nickering of horses, to the prairie settling into quiet. Somewhere in the distance a coyote called, answered by another. The sound carried far, but did not threaten. It belonged here, same as they did. In the morning they would rise, tend the garden, mend what needed mending, teach the children what they knew. Each day the same, yet never quite. Each day chosen. The future lay open before them, not easy, not certain, but theirs. Don't miss the next story. Subscribe to the Wild West Spirit.